The first thing Commander Dara Voss noticed when she stepped off the transport shuttle was the silence. Not the comfortable silence of deep space, where vacuum swallowed everything and you made peace with the emptiness. This was the silence of a place that had recently been loud. Marin Station, 140 persons in deep survey outpost anchored to the dead moon of Kesselaforth, sat under a sky the color of old bruises, and the wind moved through its prefab corridors in low, mournful registers, like something breathing that had no business breathing anymore. She pulled her collar up. The cold here was real, the kind that had weight to it. Station logs went dark 11 days ago, Lieutenant Pell said behind her, reading off his scanner. Young. Too young for this kind of posting. He had the careful face of someone trying very hard not to look afraid. Last transmission was a maintenance request. Routine. Someone asking for replacement seals on the water reclamation unit. Replacement seals. Voss said it flat, like she was tasting the words for poison. Yes, ma'am. She looked at the station entrance. The pressure door was sealed properly. No breach, no forced entry, no sign of the kind of violence that wrote itself all over surfaces. Whatever had happened here had happened on the inside. 4 of us, she said. Pelchen, Okafor. Nobody splits off, nobody goes quiet. We move together, or we don't move. Sergeant Okafor chambered a round in his pulse rifle. He was the only one of the 4 of them who didn't look bothered. And Voss had long since decided that this was either because he was genuinely unafraid, or because he had made some private accommodation with the idea of dying that the rest of them hadn't reached yet. Either way, she was glad he was here. The door hissed open. The smell hit them first. It was organic, wet, underneath everything. Not the smell of death exactly, though death was certainly part of it, but something stranger. Something that suggested process. Something that suggested the station was not empty so much as repurposed. Voss clicked on her helmet lamp and moved inside. The corridors were intact. Furniture in the common room sat undisturbed. Mugs on tables. A half-finished card game. A jacket thrown over the back of a chair with the casual intimacy of someone who expected to come back for it. Nobody had come back for it. It's like they just. Pell started. Don't, Voss said quietly. Just scan. Chen was already moving her biosensor in slow sweeps. The device was calibrated for human biosigns, but Voss had adjusted it before they landed, broadened the parameters, told it to flag anything with a metabolic signature, any metabolism, any any electrical activity. It was the kind of adjustment that the manual said you only needed in deep wilderness surveys or post-contact zones. This felt like both. The first anomaly registered in the station's lower processing level. Not human. Dense, very dense in fact, clustered in a way that suggested not one organism but many sharing a space, packed close like grain in a silo. We're going down, Voss said. The stairwell was darker than it should have been. Overhead strips were still functional, but something had coated the walls in a fibrous material. Brown-gray, layered with a texture like dried kelp. Voss touched it with a gloved finger. It was warm. Commander. Okafor's voice was very controlled. He was pointing his rifle at something in the corner of the landing. It had been a person. Dr. Hannah Rios, according to the name badge still clipped to her coat. She was seated against the wall with her knees drawn up, and her head tilted at an angle that looked almost peaceful. If you didn't look too closely, if you didn't notice the places where the fibrous material had grown through the gaps in her clothing, had worked its way into the seams of her skin, had integrated her, quietly and without apparent hurry, into the fabric of the wall itself. Pell made a sound. He pressed a fist against his mouth, and Voss let him because there was no use in pretending this was something other than what it was. She's not in distress, Chen said, her voice careful. Biozymes, she's alive, barely, but alive. Voss crouched in front of Dr. Rios. The woman's eyes were open and tracking, moving slowly in her head, taking in the 4 figures standing over her with a register of awareness that was deeply, deeply wrong. Not fear, not relief, not the wild, desperate hope of someone who had been waiting 11 days for rescue. What she saw in Hannah Rios's eyes was closer to acceptance. The acceptance of something inevitable, something you had already finished grieving. Rios. Voss kept her voice level. We're from the Meridian Response Unit. Can you hear me? The woman's mouth moved. It took a long time for sound to come out. They found the body, she said, from the drift. We should have sent it back. We should have sent it right back. What body? The Kessela survey drone brought it in, 3 months ago. It was encased. They thought it was a geological specimen, a crystal formation. Chief Aranda was excited. He thought it was a new mineral lattice. A pause. Her eyes moved to the fibrous wall beside her like she was checking on something. It wasn't a mineral lattice. Voss stood up slowly. She turned to Chen. Can we move her? Chen checked her scanner again, and then looked up with an expression that said no without saying it. Whatever's in the walls, it's in her too. The neural intelligence is. She stopped. Moving her could kill her. Then we leave a beacon and come back with medical. Commander. Okafor was very still at the bottom of the stairs. You need to see this. The lower level of Marin Station had been a processing bay. A large open floor, where survey drones were stripped and catalogued, where geological cores were sorted and sealed. Now it was something else. The fibrous material covered every surface 3 inches thick in some places, and hung from the ceiling in long pendulous structures that moved slightly in currents. Voss couldn't feel, couldn't account for. In the center of the room, raised on a platform of the material like something on an altar, was the object that had started all of this. It was roughly the size of a cargo crate, irregular in shape, dark amber in color. It had been a geological specimen once. You could still see the original crystalline surface beneath, the mineral matrix the survey team had so carefully logged and catalogued. But the amber was living, was breathing. Voss could see it pulse in slow rhythmic contractions, and from every surface of it, from every crack and seam, poured a thin, constant stream of movement. Small, fast. Each one the length of her thumb, chitinous, with a body structure she couldn't quite classify because it was wrong, because it was nothing in her xenobiology database, because whatever evolutionary tree had produced this creature had done so on a world where the branches went in directions nobody had mapped. Armored bugs by the thousands, pouring from the amber core like water from a broken pipe, spreading across the floor and the walls, pausing at the perimeter where the fibrous material ended, then turning and finding their way back, orbiting, endless and purposeful. African armadillo, Reese had said from upstairs, and the words made no sense, and now they made perfect sense, because this was exactly the thing. The name was wrong. It was human pattern matching applied to something that had no human equivalent. Something that had crossed the void between systems embedded in the crystalline skin of a dead rock, patient and compressed and waiting. The name was wrong, but the behavior was exactly what Reese had described in her fractured half-whisper. Paralytic agent, internal egg-laying, the prey becoming the cradle. Voss stood very still in the doorway of the processing bay and watched the colony move and thought about the 140 people who had lived in this station. Then she stepped back, pulled the door closed and said, "We need to know what kills them." Nobody argued. That was the thing about being in a situation bad enough. It made clarity easy. They moved back up through the station with their lamps cutting the dark, and Voss's mind running the problem the way she'd learned to run problems in the field, which was, strip out the fear, strip out the revulsion, strip out everything that is not information, and then look at what's left. What did she know? The colony had been in the station for 11 days, and it had not yet broken out of the lower level. That meant something. They were not mindless. Mindless things spread everywhere immediately. These things had purpose, had territory, had a shape to their ambition that she could potentially predict. The fibrous material was nest-building material, which meant the amber core was a queen structure of some kind, or a nursery or both, and the colony's primary drive was currently protection and expansion of that structure. They hadn't gone topside because they didn't need to yet. The personnel files were still accessible in the station's main terminal. Voss pulled the last 3 months of logs while Okafor stood watch at the stair door, and Pell sat against the wall, doing something with his hands that she recognized as the thing people did when they were trying not to shake. She pulled a chair next to him, and sat close enough that he could feel another person without making anything of it. She'd learned that one the hard way. You didn't tell people to be brave. You just stayed near them. The logs told a story in the language of incremental wrongness. First, the specimen brought in, catalogued, exciting because it was unusual. Then, a maintenance worker reporting that he couldn't sleep, that something in his dreams kept showing him underground spaces, kept showing him the inside of walls. Then, a biologist named Ferraro noting what she thought was a new fungal colony in the processing bay but recommending only that it be monitored. Then, Ferraro's logs stopping entirely. Voss read slowly and, with each entry, the picture sharpened. The colony was smart. Not smart the way humans were smart. Not clever or creative or curious, but smart the way a tide was smart. Smart the way a fire was smart. Finding every gap, exploiting every inattention. Understanding instinctively that the best strategy was not the dramatic one, but the patient one. The one where you made yourself invisible until you were everywhere. 140 people. Voss closed the terminal. Pell, she said. When we came in, you clocked the fuel storage. East side of the station. Composite tanks, am I right? He blinked. Came back into his eyes. Yeah, standard issue. Trillium compound, about 4,000 liters. Trillium burns at what temperature? He pulled a number from wherever medical officers pulled numbers, the part of their training that had been hammered in so deep it lived below thought. Sustained burn, around 3,000 Celsius. Why? He stopped. Looked at her. Oh, it won't get all of them, Voss said. The queen structure is too deep. The heat won't penetrate. But it'll set the colony back, reduce their numbers, buy us time. And more than that, she stood up. It'll tell us something. If they're heat sensitive, if they route around fire, we know which direction they won't come from. And if they're not heat sensitive, Chen said, then we learn that too. Okafor looked up from the stair door. Dr. Reese, he said. I know, Voss said it quietly. I know. She meant, I know she's in the lower level. I know what burning that section means. I know what I'm considering. She walked to the window at the end of the corridor and looked out at the bruise-colored sky and thought about Hannah Rias's eyes, the acceptance in them, the already finished grieving. She walked back to the terminal and pulled up the internal comms and keyed the frequency for the lower level. There was a long silence. Then I heard you, Rias said. Her voice was clearer than it had been in person. Something about the speaker system normalizing it, ironing out the wet, wrong quality of it. I've been able to hear everything up there. The walls carry sound. A pause. The walls carry a lot of things. Right? Do what you need to do, Commander. I mean that. Not because I've given up. Her voice steadied. Because I'm a scientist, and I have been watching these things for 11 days from closer than anyone else in the galaxy has ever been, and I need you to survive long enough for me to tell you what I've learned. Voss stared at the speaker grill. Her throat was doing something she didn't have time for. She swallowed it down. Tell me now, she said, while we still have comms. They respond to vibration. Rias's voice took on a different quality, not personal anymore, not suffering, but professional. The voice of someone who had given their whole life to knowing things, and was determined to give this one last piece of knowing to someone who could use it. Low-frequency vibration. It's how they communicate, how they coordinate. The whole colony is networked through ground vibration, through the material on the walls. When I stop breathing too hard, when I go still, they settle. Like something tuning out interference. So, if we create enough vibration, you disrupt the network, disrupt coordination. You might get them fighting each other, or just disorganized. Disorganized is as good as slow, Commander. Against 100,000 of these things, slow is the margin you need. Voss looked at her team. Okafor raised an eyebrow. She raised one back. One more thing, Rias said. The amber structure. The core. It doesn't pulse if the light hits it directly. I've been lying here watching it for 9 days. Strong light, direct beam, not diffuse, and the pulsing stops. I don't know what that means physiologically. I don't know if it means what I hope it means, but... A pause. The breathing on the line was very careful. I hope it means what I hope it means. So do I, Voss said. She kept the channel open. She didn't close it. She put the station's internal comms on broadcast so that everything they said in the upper level would carry down to the lower. So that Hannah Reese could hear the plan as it developed. So she wasn't alone in the dark with the walls that breathed and the things that moved through them. It was a small thing. She did it anyway. All right, Vosso said. And her team turned to look at her with the specific expression that people got when they were ready to be given something to do, because anything was better than standing still in a fear you couldn't name. Here's how we work the problem. They used the station's industrial resonance emitters, equipment designed for geological survey, for sending low-frequency pulses into rock to map subsurface structures. There were 3 of them mounted on the lower walls of the processing bay access corridor, and they had to go back down to reach them. They went armed and in formation and with every lamp burning at full intensity. And the things that skittered at the edges of their light were not large individually, but were numerous in a way that the mind wanted to refuse. The way the mind refused the true number of stars or the true depth of ocean. The magnitude simply larger than the categories you'd built for magnitude. Okafor shot 3 of them that came too close and noted that the pulse fire worked, and Voss noted that the ones nearest the shot ones moved away from the sound. Good. The sound aversion was real. She filed it. They got the first emitter running in 4 minutes. Chen was the fastest with the calibration, and she had it broadcasting at 40 hertz. Below human hearing, felt more than heard, a pressure in the chest, a wobble in the eyeballs. Before the nearest cluster of colony members began to behave oddly, not fleeing, not attacking. Moving in small tight circles the way an animal moved when its navigation suddenly stopped working. "It's working," Pell breathed. "Second emitter," Voss said. The second emitter was further along the corridor, past a section where the fibrous material was particularly thick. And as they moved toward it, Voss felt the floor vibrate under her boots with something that wasn't the emitter. Something that was coming from below, from the queen structure, from whatever response the colony was generating to the disruption of its network. A counter-signal, low and arrhythmic and wrong in her teeth and her sinuses and the joint of her jaw. "They're pushing back," Chen said. "So push harder." Voss got to the second emitter and started pulling the calibration panel herself. Her gloves making the work awkward, the small motions of the panel catches requiring a precision her fingers kept slipping away from because the counter-vibration from below was climbing up through the floor and into her bones. She made her hands be still by will. She found the stillness. She worked. The second emitter came online. 80 hertz. The floor shook. The fibrous material on the walls began to tremble and, in places, to crack. Fine hairline fractures spreading through it like a map of somewhere, like the station was trying to tell them something in a language made of fractures. From below came a sound that Voss would a long time afterward trying to describe, and would settle. Eventually, on calling it grief, though she knew that was her pattern matching. Her human brain finding a human shape for something that had no human equivalent. The same way the survey team had called the amber structure a mineral lattice, and the creatures African armadillos. You found the closest word. You used it anyway. You knew it was wrong. The colony came out of the lower level in a wave. Not the measured, patient orbital flow they'd displayed before. This was uncoordinated, disrupted. 100,000 organisms losing the signal that told them who they were, as part of something larger. Scrambling now on individual impulse, which was exactly what Reese had promised and exactly as dangerous in the short term as a coordinated attack, because there were so many of them and the corridor was not wide. "Run," Voss said. She meant it precisely, and without elaboration they ran. Back up the stairs, Okafor covering the rear, his pulse rifle cycling rapidly, and the sound of it filling the stairwell with hard flat reports that the fibrous walls absorbed and distorted into something muffled and strange. Things struck the back of Voss's boots. She kept moving. She had learned, somewhere from the 15 years she'd spent doing this kind of work, that the mind's insistence on looking at what was following you was the mind's most reliably fatal instinct. And she had trained herself out of it the way you trained yourself out of any instinct, by making a different habit stronger. She did not look back. They cleared the stairwell, Chen pulling the door and Pell throwing the magnetic lock, and behind it the sound was enormous. Not loud exactly, but huge. The sound of many small things moving all at once, a seething that pressed against the door and made the frame flex. "That's not going to hold," Okafor said. "It doesn't need to hold forever," Voss said. She was already moving to the east side of the station. Pell fuel tanks. The Trillium tanks were exactly where the manifest said they'd be. 4 large composite cylinders in a sealed maintenance bay, feed lines running to the station's thermal grid. Voss had no formal demolitions training, but she had 15 years in the field, and a working understanding of what happened when you introduced an ignition source to a compressed volatile in a sealed space. And the calculations she ran in the 90 seconds it took to reach the tanks told her that a controlled bleed of the first cylinder into the maintenance bay would produce a fire sustainable enough to run through the ventilation shafts and hit the lower processing level in approximate 4 minutes. It would not reach the queen structure. Rias had been right about that. The core was too deep, too insulated by the fibrous material. But it would hit the upper colony, the disrupted swarming mass of them. And it would buy the time. That time buying was the whole strategy. She opened the bleed valve on cylinder 1. "Get to the roof access," she said. "Topside, signal the shuttle for extraction." "Commander, you're not. Go." She looked at Pell until he went, looked at Chen until she went. Then she looked at Okafor, who had not gone, who was standing with his rifle at his shoulder watching the door at the end of the maintenance bay. "You know I'm not leaving," he said. "I know." She found the ignition source, a utility torch, hanging on its hook exactly where safety regulations required it to hang, in exactly the place that suggested whoever had designed this station had possessed an engineer's faith that the universe would behave according to plan and a complete absence of imagination for what happened when it didn't. She took the torch down from its hook, looked at it, thought about Hannah Reese, about what it meant to be the thing that knew the most about a danger. about what it meant to spend that knowing in the dark. She turned on the comms. Reese. Silence for a long time then. Still here. I need to know if you can move, any part of you. Hands, feet. My right hand. She said it with the tone of someone reporting a fact they'd checked many times. My right hand has been free for about 3 days, I think. The material didn't grow as far on that side. I don't know why. Voss looked at Okafor. He looked back. Where is your right hand relative to the queen structure? A pause. The kind of pause where someone was looking at something very carefully. About 2 meters to my left. The core is against the south wall. Is there anything between your hand and the core? Open floor. But Commander, I can't. You don't have to move far. You don't have to reach it. Voss clicked the utility torch and watched the blue flame take. You just have to be right about the light. Another pause. Longer. Voss could hear the breathing on the line change. Could hear the shift from the careful measured breath of someone managing a situation into the faster, less controlled breath of someone who was feeling something. Not hope exactly. More like the thing that comes just before hope. The moment when a door appears in a wall you had already accepted as solid. My scanner, Rias said slowly. It's clipped to my coat. My right hand could reach it. The lamp on it, it's a direct beam light. It's not much, but do it. The disruption to the network. The emitters, they're still running? Still running. You'll have the window. Do it now. The sounds that came through the comms after that were sounds Voss would also spend a long time trying to describe and would also fail. The effort of a body trying to move when the body had been largely incorporated into a living wall, the small wet sounds of the fibrous material resisting, and then giving, and underneath it all the very faint sound of something electronic. A scanner powering up, calibrating, and then nothing. Then light. Not light that Voss could see, not from up here in the maintenance bay with the bleed valve open and the trillium already making the air taste like copper pennies. But on the comms she heard what light sounded like when it hit the right target in the right way. First silence, then a sound like a large thing settling like a ship docking or a building exhaling, and then, from deep in the walls, through the fibrous material, transmitted through the station's bones the way all vibration moved through this place. Something that she chose to call a sound, and that was not exactly a sound. That was more like a pressure resolving, like a question that had finally, after 11 days of being asked, received an answer. The amber core stopped pulsing, not her data, Reese's voice told her. It stopped, Reese said. The core is, it's still. It's not moving. A pause that was longer than it needed to be, if it were purely informational. A pause that was the length of someone taking a very careful breath, while lying inside a wall and pointing a scanner lamp at an alien queen structure. Commander, I think we killed it. The door at the end of the maintenance bay buckled once. Voss raised the torch. Okafor, go. With respect. That's an order, he went. He went fast because Okafor had the gift of arguing only to the exact point of usefulness and then stopping. She heard his boots on the floor, and then the door swinging, and then nothing from that direction. She opened the bleed valve all the way. The trillium hissed into the bay in a low cloud, and the torchlight made it shimmer. Made it beautiful in the specific way that dangerous things were often beautiful. And Voss thought about the 140 people in the manifest, and about Hannah Rias's right hand reaching in the dark, and about the word the survey team had chosen for the amber structure. Mineral lattice, they'd said. Because it looked like something they recognized, and because it is very human to name the new thing after the old thing you see in it. And this was not a character flaw but a fact about what it meant to be the kind of creature that needed to name things, that needed to put language between itself and the raw, incomprehensible fact of existence before it could begin to engage. It was a very human thing, all of it. The naming and the fear and the stubbornness, and Hannah Rias in the dark, with her right hand free and her scientist voice, the one that had been trained to report rather than react, holding on by that voice for 11 days because knowing mattered. Because the knowing was the only thing she had left to give. Voss touched the torch to the trillium cloud. She was already running before it caught. The east stairwell was 3 seconds from where she stood. She took them into single continuous motion, hitting the landing and the next flight without breaking stride. The heat behind her, arriving as a pressure before it arrived as heat. The station's fire suppression system, engaging with a high whine, and the soda water that would not be enough. She hit the roof access door which Okafor had left open, which was the one breach of protocol she had ever seen him commit, and which she intended to commend him for, if they both survived the next 60 seconds. The bruise-colored sky of Kessel 4 opened above her. The shuttle was there, already descending. Pell at the hatch, waving hard, the rotor wash flattening his hair and his expression both. She ran across the roof. Behind her, below her, the station made sounds she did not analyze. The fire suppression whine, and the fire itself. And something underneath both that she recognized from the comms. That settling, that resolving, that pressure becoming answer. Spreading now from the lower levels upward through the fibrous walls as the Queen's signal died in the colony, 10 or 100,000 disorganized individuals that such cut from the network that told them what they were, began to do what all disorganized things did eventually. They stopped. She made the shuttle with 4 seconds to spare, Okafor pulling her in by the forearm with a grip that was not gentle, Pell already hitting the ascent controls. "Reese," she said before the hatch sealed. She got on the comms. "Reese, we're out. We're up." The channels was full of static and the growing distance and the fire suppression frequencies from below. But underneath all of it, fractured and thin, she heard, "I know. I can feel the vibration changing." A pause. "It's quieter. It's the quietest it's been." The station fell away below them, shrinking into the bruise-colored landscape. "We're coming back," Voss said. "Medical unit. Proper equipment. We're coming back for you." "I know," Rios said again. And then after a moment, in the voice of someone stating a professional conclusion they'd been working toward for 11 days. "Commander, I need you to understand something. About what we found. Tell me, it's not a predator, not the way we understand predators. It didn't come here looking for us. It came here dormant, in a rock, on a drift trajectory that had nothing to do with us." She was choosing her words slowly, the way someone chose words when they were very tired and the words still mattered. It woke up because it found an environment it could use. It's an opportunist, evolutionary, not malicious. That doesn't make it safe. No, but it makes it understandable. And understanding is a breath, a careful breath. Understanding is the margin, Commander. You said that once, in a briefing. I read the transcript. Voss watched the station through the shuttle's forward port. The lower levels were glowing. Contained, the station's fire systems were holding it in the processing bay, which was what she'd estimated. Which meant the estimation had been right. Below the glow she knew, the amber core sat dark and still, its pulsing stopped. The Queen structure silenced by the direct beam of a scanner lamp held by a woman who had spent 9 days lying inside a wall in order to get close enough to the right piece of knowledge. "We'll send everything back to command," Voss said. "The logs, your observations, everything. They'll want to contain it. Yes. They'll want to destroy it. Probably." Another pause. "I think that's a mistake. I think this thing crossed space in a rock. I think it did that more than once, maybe many times. I think we are very likely not the first intelligence it has encountered." She paused again, and Voss heard in the pause the sound of someone who was tired and in pain and still thinking, still processing, still holding the scientist's faith that the unknown was more useful than the destroyed. "I think we need to understand it before we erase it. I think understanding is the only strategy that actually scales." Voss looked at Okafor. He said nothing. He was the kind of person who understood when a silence was better than a response. "I'm going to put that in my report," Voss said. "They might not listen, maybe not." She turned away from the port. "But I'm going to put it in my report." Below, the station's lower glow had settled to a steady amber, not the biological amber of the Queen structure. Just fire. Just ordinary human fire, doing the ordinary human work of consuming things in the hope of containing them. From this altitude it looked almost peaceful. Like a lantern in a window, like someone keeping a light on, the shuttle climbed. In the lower level of Marin Station in the dark, beneath the fire's reach, the Queen structure sat cold and still. The fibrous material on the walls had begun to dry, to lose its warmth, the networked life going out of it slowly the way warmth left any body. From the extremities first working toward the center, the last warmth, the longest warmth. Around the amber core, 100,000 small organisms moved in slow, irregular patterns, individual and disoriented, finding the walls and the floor and each other without the signal that had told them what all of that meant, without the vibration language that had connected them into the one mind that one mind had been. They were not defeated exactly. They were not anything exactly. They were the remnant of something that had crossed the void between stars in a piece of rock and had woken up in the wrong place at the wrong time to find itself engaged with something it had never evolved to encounter. Something that named things. Something that put language between itself and the void. Something that froze in operating rooms and drank too much and got off on the wrong foot with people and sat close to frightened colleagues in dark corridors without making anything of it. something that left the comms channel open. The doctor who had been incorporated into the south wall lay still and waited and breathed. Her right hand, which had been free for 3 days, lay in her lap now. The scanner it had held had done its work, and the lamp was still on. A small blue-white beam pointing at the ceiling, casting a circle of ordinary light in an extraordinary dark. The fibrous material around her was cooling, but it was not releasing her, and she was not trying to make it. She was patient. She had learned patience from the things that had taught it to her, which was the kind of teaching that did not require the teacher to intend it. She would wait for the medical unit. She would give them everything she knew. She would survive, in the end, survived by the specific margin of her stubbornness and her scanner, and the 9 days she had spent as a scientist doing what scientists did, which was stay in the problem when every other instinct said leave, and watch, and record, and find the one true thing inside the overwhelming wrongness that could be used. Humans did that. That was the specific and peculiar and occasionally fatal thing that humans did. They stayed in it. They found the margin. Above, the shuttle climbed through the bruise-colored sky of Kessela the Forv, carrying 4 people who had gone into an infested station and come out with more information than they'd gone in with, and 1 fewer casualty than they'd feared. Which in Commander Daravos's experience was the closest thing to a victory that the universe ever actually offered, and which she had long since decided was enough. It was enough. It was more than enough. The stars came out as they cleared the upper atmosphere, as the sky darkened from purple to black, and the planet curved away below, and ahead of them the void opened in its incomprehensible depth and indifference, full of rocks that drifted on trajectories that had nothing to do with anyone, full of things waiting to wake up in the wrong place, full of the long, slow work of encounter that had been going on, since before there were minds to name it, and would go on long after. Voss looked at it and felt, as she always did at this altitude and this moment, the specific combination of very small and very stubborn that had kept her species going through every version of this situation they had ever encountered. Small and stubborn and not done yet, not done at all.